Dr. Compitello is professor of this Spanish and head of the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. With a PhD from the Indiana University, he was the associate chair of the Department of Romance and Classical Languages at the Michigan State University before he came to the University of Arizona in 1995. As an administrator, Professor Compitello has been key to contributing to build one of the largest and most productive programs in the country. Currently, our basic language program is the second largest in the country. We are the sixth largest Portuguese language program in the United States. Our Spanish for Heritage Learner program, one of the two oldest, is currently ranked first in the country, and the same can be said of our translation and interpretation program. I can assure you that, for me, Professor Compitello is a visionary leader. As a scholar, he has authored and edited 4 books and published in major journals. His current research is on urban cultural geography. He is a specialist in Hispanic films. But I would like to share with you a story that I was told today by a very special friend. And it is that in addition to being an exceptional administration scholar, Professor Compitello is a talented actor. I bet you didn't know that. While working at the Michigan State University and even at the University of Arizona, he directed and acted in some plays. One of them was Don Juan Penario, that he played in Michigan, which is a religious fantasy drama written in 1844 by José Zorrilla. He did not only direct, but he himself played the main character. And until now, the professor who played the main character's father is amazed at his ability to memorize 1,000 verses of a really bad poetry. His play was a success, a real huge success, and he decided to go on a tour to the University of Kentucky, that, by the way, was having a conference on 19th century Spain. They got a van, and Professor Compitello and another faculty did the driving. So, as you can see, they drove the school bus. So, just help me to welcome Professor Compitello.
So what I'm going to propose this afternoon is that we take a walk, okay? And we're going to take a walk through time and space, and we're actually going to take a walk through the last 15 years of my life, okay? I hope that by the time you come here for Humanities Week next year, you'll be able to pick up a copy of what you're going to see here on the screen today and read it. And that would really be nice. Maybe someday that will happen. So the other day I picked up the Tucson Weekly and I saw this. Okay? Yet another indication of the ongoing controversy of the Rio Nuevo project. And I remembered when Rio Nuevo started, and I remembered thinking at that time, why would you call the urban development plan for Tucson Rio Nuevo? Then I remembered, of course, that virtually every other major urban development plan in the United States, thinking in general terms, was also based on a body of water. The Inner Harbor in Baltimore, the South Seaport in New York. My father used to work in what's now the South Seaport under the Brooklyn Bridge in the printing industry that disappeared, the Docklands in England, and of course the Guggenheim Museum project in Bilbao in Spain. Now, what do all these things have in common? Some of them were successful, some of them weren't. In the case of Tucson, it wasn't a good plan gone bad, it was a bad plan gone really bad. But that's another story, and that's another lecture at some time in the future. Now, one day, 2 years ago, I was walking across the Paseo de la Castellana, attempting to catch the bus to take me down, to take some more pictures for what eventually you're going to see today. And I was stuck in my tracks when I saw this. And I got closer and I saw this. okay? And I said, well, I can't tell you what I said. But here it was, in black and white, what I was attempting to put into words. And I'll come back to this at the end of the talk to explain why it was so important. Luckily, I did not get run over by one of the 75 buses that was hurtling down the Castellana at that time, but I did have time to take these pictures. And we'll see why these are important when I do my conclusions. Now, can everybody see these? Are they clear? Right. Okay. So what am I going to do today? I'm going to talk about what happens in Madrid from 1985 until around 2003. It's a story of what happens when democracy is restored to Spain and when there's an attempt to alter the nature of urban planning, and by that alter the nature of life in Madrid, and also to alter the life in other major Spanish cities, because the plan for Madrid, the 1985 plan that was started in 1979 actually, would become the model for other plans. What happened in Barcelona, what happened in Valencia, what happened in Bilbao, what happened in Seville, were all based on what we're going to talk about today, with more or less the same kind of results. Now, what I'm going to give you today is essentially the conclusions stripped of most of the theoretical material and just giving you the highlights of how this plays out. The mantra for today is a quote by the famous urban geographer David Harvey, who said, "Money is the root of all evil, but you can't do anything good without it." Okay? And therein lies the rub, because what happens when the good things that you want to do, for which you have money, actually pervert the processes that you wanted to put in place in the first place. Now, first, a little bit of urban geography. I'm going to take you on a little tour of what Madrid looks like. This is, let's get this clicker to work, this is the city of Madrid as it now exists. Okay? An urban megapolis, sprawled out over hundreds of kilometers. This little one there, that was Madrid in the 17th century. That's the walled city of Madrid before the walls were torn down in the 1800s to expand the city to these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That piece there is called the Almendra Central, because it looks like an almond. Okay? And the almond is what Madrid was until about the 1930s and 40s, when it began to absorb outlying communities as the city grew outward. And from that point on, especially after the 1940s, there was a tremendous tension about what it meant to be, what Madrid was going to be like in the future. Now, this is what that little center, this is where we'll visit today, the center of the city. Okay? Most of you, if you've traveled to Madrid, have been here to the Palacio area. You've been over here to Sol. You might have been up by the university, up and down this area. You've probably gone up and down the Paseo del Prado, because the Prado is right there, and the Thyssen Museum is right there. You might have been over to the Retiro Park, we'll talk about in the moment, but you probably haven't been here. Okay? This is where we're going to be today most of the time. We're going to be in the Barrio of Embajadores, the southernmost part of the center of Madrid. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, if you want to see what this plays out like in physical space, you can see right here, this is the Distrito Centro. Okay? There is the Royal Palace. Okay? Over here is the Retiro, and over here is Atocha train station. This is the Distrito Centro. This is the area right below it. You can see that once again, here is the Atocha train station. This used to be all light industry. It's now mostly residential. And this is the Retiro district, and you can see the Retiro right there. If you've been really lucky, you've gotten a chance to row one of those little boats in the estanque in the middle of the Retiro, but I haven't done that. Now this is a map of the center of the Embajadores. This is the Embajadores area, and if you'll notice, this is the Calle Atocha. We'll spend time here. This is the Plaza, where can I see it? The Plaza de Lavapiés will be there, and the Ronda de Valencia. This is the Embajadores area, and that's where we're going, okay? Because in 1985, actually in the early 80s, when Madrid decided it was going to redo its urban plan, it decided that it was going to do 3 or 4 things. One, it was going to stop the incredible amount of speculation and destruction of the urban patrimony. The 1961 plan for Madrid was completely growth-based, and it went tearing through the center of the city, putting up buildings without any code for respecting the neighborhoods, doing away with housing stock, and essentially destroying the urban fabric, putting in all kinds of transportation based on mobility by cars, et cetera, that tied up traffic in the center of the city, especially along its southern tier, right around where we're going to be. Curiously, when Madrid decided to do the basis for the urban plan, this is what the final version of it looked like, when it decided to do the introduction to the urban plan, it called it not Build Out Madrid, it didn't call it Make Madrid Bigger and Better, it didn't call it Rio Nuevo, no new in it, it was called Recover Madrid. Because the idea of the 1985, which was done by a group of urban progressive planners, some of them who had worked with the Italian urban planners in Bologna, Campos Minuti and others who had studied in the United States, others who had studied in France. Their idea was to do one thing. And the key phrase was, garantizar el derecho de la ciudad a todos. Make sure that the city is open to all residents. Okay? And to do away with speculation, to do away with class warfare. Above all, it was to recover and not to grow. This, of course, was pretty important because the economy in Spain at that point was absolutely stagnant. There wasn't any plan for major growth. Unfortunately, this plan, which was brilliant in its conception about guaranteeing the right to the city for everybody, did not foresee the tremendous growth in the Spanish economy when Spain joined the European Union, and that the city eventually would be in the hands of a right-leaning government which had no desire to fulfill this mandate, but had other mandates more in line with putting builders, banks, and construction companies in collusion to exact the highest monopoly rents for the places under construction, the areas that were construction. Now, we're going to begin right here, okay? This is the Reina Sofia. When it was originally built, it was called the Centro de Arte Reina Sofia. It was supposed to be the kind of container that the Pompidou Center is in Paris, okay? Because at that point, the government bought the building, but they had no idea what they were going to do with it. They knew they wanted to restore it, okay? And so this is the Reina Sofia, the Museo Nacional Centro de Arte Reina Sofia as it looks now, with these sleek new elevators, okay, et cetera, et cetera. If you have children and you don't have anything for them to do, you don't know what to do, put them in that elevator, have them ride up and down for an hour. Been there, done that, works really, really well, okay? The other building is the Atocha train station, okay? What these two buildings have in common, okay, and this was the beginning of the project. The project was going to begin with renovating Atocha, as I'll talk about in a minute. Literally, there's the Reina Sofia. There's the Atocha train station. Across the street from each other, once the process was put into place, it had a kind of expansive effect that rolled all through the surrounding neighborhoods and was going to have both good and very deleterious consequences for everybody involved. Now, the other piece This is what was going on at the late 1980s, beginning of the 1990s. The other piece of the story, okay, as Paul Harvey would have said, okay, is right here. This is the Plaza de Lavapiés. Lavapiés is the most, always recognized as the most traditionally Spanish, the Spanish use the word castizo, part of Madrid, okay? And it all too has been spruced up, okay? New facades and everything. And the city has put a lot of work into renovation, renovation processes. This is an abandoned school from the Padres Pios, which is now a part of the university system in Madrid. That's a detail of it. This here is one of the most famous buildings in Madrid. This is the Corrala, one of the original community living spaces, which has been completely spiffed up. Okay, this is the Teatro Olimpia, where the Spanish National Theater does its avant-garde works in the Plaza de Lavapiés. It replaces the old Teatro Olimpia that literally was, well, it actually literally did fall down, okay, and had to be replaced. And here you see one of the many banners hanging around the city saying, this is the city and the European community and the private sector working together to renovate buildings. Okay, and this one, 17 apartments and 2 commercial facilities for downstairs. Now the centerpiece of this plan, the centerpiece of the plan for redoing Madrid, okay, it had 5 major pieces. One of them was called Operation Atocha. This is the Atocha train station. For many decades, it was the principal train station in Madrid. All of the train stations in Madrid at that point were located within a mile of each other, right along this route, on the borderline between the Distrito Centro and Arganzuela, because that's where all the light industry was in Madrid at that time. This building, this is the original building here. Okay, if you want to see it in a little more context, you can see this is the train station here, that's the piece of it. And this building here is the Reina Sofia, okay? Which originally, as we'll see in a moment, was a hospital. But this was the work of the architect Rafael Moneo, who also redid the Prado and the Thyssen and a variety of other projects. Moneo was the dean of the School of Architecture at Harvard for many years. Okay, what would happen is that this part of the city, this part of the train station, which was the old original train station, would be taken out of service, and the train station would become the first of Madrid's intermodal transportation centers. Madrid would reroute the subway. It would reroute the light rail lines, the cercanías. It would reroute the long-distance trains and the bus service, all to run through Atocha. They would build several others, but this was a way of making transportation more accessible and efficient. Now, I have to say, for as much as you could hate whatever government there was in Madrid at any time, the transportation system in Madrid is incredibly efficient, well run, and it goes all over the place. I was thinking that as I stood on the Rector Street platform in New York City 2 weeks ago, waiting for the subway to come, how much nicer, how much better the transportation system is in Madrid. Now, this is what the station looks like on the outside. There's the old train station, which became an emblem. This old 19th century shed, one of the last iron buildings left in Madrid, curiously would become one of the emblematic buildings of Madrid, along with the Capitol building and several others. So emblematic was it, of course, that was the building that the Arab terrorists decided they were going to blow up in 2008. Didn't come to pass, but that was what they decided. This was, for them, this building is Madrid, okay? This is the Cercanías, the local, the regional train service, all of the red buses, okay, in Madrid. This is the way to get into the Cercanías, and also it was here that the socialist government decided they would start the new high-speed rail system, okay, the AVE, which is the Spanish equivalent of the TGV. As a matter of fact, the French TGV, train de grande vitesse. As a matter of fact, the French agreed to help dismantle the Basque terrorist movement in France on the condition that the Spanish bought their rolling stock from them. It was a good deal, I guess. Right? This is a fairly early iteration of what the AVE looked like. However, this is what became of the Atocha train station, the interior, the old train set, okay? It's offices, it's eating establishments, and it's a tropical garden. Why a tropical garden? Well, because Moneo thought that since the train station originally was called La Estación de Mediodía, okay, and all of the trains went south, why not have a tropical garden, okay, in the train station? You have no idea how much water it takes, okay, to keep these plants growing in the middle of a high desert. Madrid's not as dry as Tucson, but it's not far away, okay? Now, of course, this brings up an interesting point. When the planners who were planning Madrid at that time wanted to do away with speculation, and they wanted to make sure that every one of their projects had a specific purpose. So the train station in Madrid served a tremendously important purpose. However, at the same time, when you do something like this, essentially what you're doing is selling the vision of what a building was, removing its principal purpose and selling its history. This, of course, is what urbanists call selling place, or the heritage industry. You see this all the time. Every time you go to eat in lower New York, you're eating in a building that once produced something, whether it's shoes or it was a printing plant or something. All of that function has been sucked out and replaced with something else. It's always a danger when you're doing renovation, and it's one of the dangers that came to pass in this project in Madrid. Okay? Now, across the street from Atocha, okay, is one of the most traditional bars in Madrid. It's called El Brillante, okay? And the Brillante is kind of a litmus test of what's going on in the neighborhood. And the Brillante's clientele changed dramatically in the late 1980s and 90s. As Mocho Puente, who was a radio personality and journalist, notes this when he says, you know, the people who usually always went to the Brillante, okay, for breakfast, mostly to eat this, however, bocadillo de calamares, el mejor de Madrid, okay, but who went there for breakfast in the morning, all of a sudden there were different people. There were people with instruments, there were people with their portfolios, et cetera, and that's because the nature of the neighborhood was changing, precisely because at the same time the city decided to renovate the train station, the national government had bought this, the Hospital San Carlos, okay, which was scheduled to be demolished in 1965. It was saved from the wrecking ball and would become the Reina Sofia, okay? So the government bought the building in 1977, and they gave the project to Antonio Fernandez Alba and said, renovate the building. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but just make it usable. And Fernandez Alba did that, but he did not anticipate that the government was going to use it to make a museum, okay? And it was the museum part of it that became very difficult because there was no way to get visitors from one floor to the other efficiently. We'll talk more about that in a moment. As time went on, okay, they finally decided that the Reina Sofia was going to be a museum. They moved the collection of modern art there. They decided they would move Guernica there, and they began to run out of space. So by the late 1990s, plans were in the work to expand the Reina Sofia, okay? And the project was given to a French architect, Jean Nouveau, okay, who built out the expansion. We'll talk about that at the moment, but this is what it looked like when it was going up. There is when it was finished, and you can see here, okay, there's the initial Reina Sofia. This is the expansion, okay? It's huge, okay, and it's red. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. And at the same time, as the museum began to become more popular, okay, the plaza in the front of the museum, the Plaza Sanchez Bustillo, began to be renovated. And the government started to buy up public buildings with a cultural importance and to site them in this area. So it bought this building, which is, the Reina Sofia is right there, okay? The Hospital San Carlos. This part of the Hospital San Carlos became the Royal Conservatory of Music, okay? I think I have a better close-up of it. There it is, okay? Does anybody know what this building originally was? It was the morgue. There's some, I'm not going there. I have a son who's a musician. I'm not going there. Okay, so, and it began to spread up the street that goes out of the Plaza de Sanchez Bustillo, up the street, and at the end of the Calle de Santa Isabel is this building, the Cine Doré, which was one of the first movie theaters in Madrid, which became the site of the National Film Archives. So all of a sudden, in close proximity, you had three major cultural works. You had the Reina Sofia, which became the second most popular museum in Spain. You had the conservatory, and you had the Filmoteca. This began to flow different kinds of visitors into the neighborhood. It began to grow a different kind of clientele. And what else do you think it did? It raised the property values through the roof, okay? Gentrification was in full flow, okay? Now, you can see this best because the area around the Reina Sofia became the area in which most of the avant-garde art galleries in Madrid were located. And this is just a few of them. I took these pictures over a series of years. I went back and changed them, but these galleries are still there. I love this one, Nietzsche. Closed, of course. The Galleria Fernando La Torre, Clisopia. This is a fairly new one, and this one, of course, is the newest. This is a gallery of Asian art. Okay. The other thing that changed along the Calle de Santa Isabel, which is always a bellwether, okay, are the restaurants. Okay. Now, this is a secret part of the talk, which I'm going to go over really quickly, because in order to get this part of the talk, you have to go to Madrid with me. So just look at the pictures of all these restaurants, and just remember that he said that you can see what all these restaurants are like at some time in the future. Okay. Had the process of gentrification stopped at the top of Santa Isabel, things would have been completely different. But by the late 1990s, that wave of gentrification was beginning to flow down the hill. And we're going to take a trip down the hill into the area of Lavapiés in just a moment. But I thought I'd use Leonard Bernstein here as a marker, because this is literally about displacement and whose home is Lavapiés. If you go down the hill into Lavapiés from either the Salitre or this other street down into the area of Lavapiés, you come into an area which was where in Madrid at this time the battle between traditional and modern values, okay? High rents and bad housing, A huge increase in the immigrant population, very old people living on minuscule rents was all played out at the same time. Three things came to the fore as we went through this period in the late 1990s in Lavapiés. One was something had to be done about housing, okay? Because the number of very poor housing units in this area was one of the highest in the cities, but it wasn't the highest. Why wasn't this problem addressed? It wasn't addressed because the owners rapidly found out that Lavapiés was beginning to absorb lots of cool artsy types, okay, who, if they'd lived in New York, would have lived first in Soho, okay, south of Houston Street, now in the Bowery. The Bowery's in, if you read the New York Times this week, or in that area because they wanted to be around the art scene, okay? And then they found out, well, you know, if we hold out long enough, these property values are going to go through the roof. And that's what began to play out, okay, in Lavapiés. In addition, okay, in Lavapiés, in these few blocks, okay, during this period, during the late 1990s and up until now, the definition of what it means to be a Spaniard is being played out and changed because the huge influx of immigrants, most of them legal, okay, and the pull of 16 different nationalities, the pull of many languages is stressing what it means to be a Spaniard, what it means to study Spanish culture, who's producing it, what's it going to look like, what's it going to sound like, etc. All of these are playing out in this area, and there was a tremendous contest, okay, and a tremendous attempt to push decision-making in one direction without having the input of the population, okay? This is what Lavapiés is beginning to look like now, all right? These would not have been here 40 years ago, okay? As a matter of fact, when the urban planners for the community of Madrid, okay, did their first regional plan, okay, actually, I should put it in the positive way, it was not until 2000 that any planning document for the city of Madrid actually recognized immigration as an important issue. Up until that time, it was just as if it wasn't happening, okay? It wasn't paid any attention to. By the time they began to pay attention to it, it was almost too late, but maybe not completely, okay? Now, this should sound very timely, okay? By the late 1990s, something would change. And what would change was that the movement, the Ocupa movement, squatters, as we know them, who had originally begun in Spain in the late 70s as a movement to simply find empty buildings and live in them, had morphed. It had morphed into a fairly unified, cohesive group of young people, some not so young people, who decided that they were going to form alternative communities, take over buildings and form alternative communities, very much like the anarchist collectives in the 1930s in Spain. Okay, they probably these groups probably owe their beginnings to that. What happens is, all of a sudden, 1997, the Ocupas plop down in Lavapiés, and they plop down right here in a building on the Calle de Embajadores 68, a building that had been vacant for decades. It originally had belonged to the Ministry of Agriculture or something. The building had been, since 1920, there had been nobody in the building. But you see here, this building right here, okay, you see a building there? No, gone, okay? Because the city at the same time had decided it was going to take this piece of land, the building was on that part of the piece of land, and turn it into a park. Why a park? Well, there was no green space in Lavapiés, okay? And if you want to attract high-end residents, you need green space. okay? So this became, Embajadora 68 became one of the most contested spaces in Madrid for a year. And what happened was that the Koopas were able to take control of the discourse and begin to elaborate an alternative discourse to speculation and gentrification. And they did it by providing services for the majority of the communities that were getting no services. They were able to, being young, okay, being able to use computers, they were able to appropriate the internet, they were able to get their word out, and literally they were able to change the nature of public discourse. All the time the government attempting to discredit them, okay? This is, of course, a year later they were gone, and this is what was left. Space, okay? Which you can never have enough green space in a city, okay? But there were other green spaces available, and this land, literally what the city needed to do was get rid of the Koopas. They would keep coming back. This group was called the Laboratory. That building was number 1, laboratory number 1. They would go someplace else and be thrown out. And they'll come back in just a moment after we take a nod to Creedence Clearwater, okay? Because looking out your back door is about what the end of this lecture is all about. What happens if you don't open your eyes and see what's really there, okay? By 2001, okay, the Koopas were back. They had occupied a building on the Calle de Amparo, 103, just on the edge of Embajadores. It was an old printing plant which had been empty since the 1940s, okay? Within a month, the Caja de Madrid, the biggest savings and loan institution in Spain, announced that it was going to take one of its old buildings and turn it into a cultural center. Guess where that cultural center was located? Right around the corner from Amparo 103. Here is the Casa Encendida on Ronda de Valencia. You can see, you could literally look out the door and see the Reina Sofia, okay? And right here, Amparo 103 was where the Labo was. All of a sudden, you were going to have two competing versions. This is what the building looked like that was renovated. Nice neo-mudéjar building from the turn of the century. You were going to have two competing versions of alternative culture side by side. That's where we come back to these things that almost cost me my life when I tried to take pictures of them in Madrid. Notice, this is the sanitized version of alternative culture. I like this guy because he looks almost like me. Just a little bit edgy, okay? All the tools of the trade. There's a pen, there's a computer, and it says, you know, your point of encounter where different forms of pensar and hacer, doing and speaking, come together. The only thing that it could not permit was that the real alternative be its neighbor. You couldn't have real alternative culture and state-supported alternative cultures living side by side. Curiously, the state-supported alternative culture came with its own security cameras, okay? And what happened? All of a sudden, the building on Calle Amparo 103 was emptied of the Koopas. It stood empty for 2 years, and it became luxury apartments. Surprise, surprise, okay? Renting for, this is 2002 prices, almost €500,000 in lavapiés, okay? Which meant that the connection to culture, this is now the fourth cultural element, was able to begin to attract, even as a swimming pool, was able to attract people that would not have lived in Lavapiés before. Now, is all of this worked out? Is everything hunky-dory all the time? No. Neighborhoods are still funky, but they're funky New York style. Okay? They're funky in the sense that you could walk around and you know, maybe this isn't the safest place in the world, but that restaurant's really cool. I'm going to go to that restaurant. Or, oh my God, I just got to walk this way to go to that gallery. And that's what was going on. Okay? Now, when Jean Nouveau built his expansion of the Reina Sofia, he said his goal was to make the old 18th century building connect with its environment, to make it a kind of an open pueblo. And he achieves that through his use of glass, okay, as you can see here, okay? Almost the entire building is glass, and this impressive facade. He does this by opening the outside of the building to the inside. This is the central patio of the new entrance to the Reina Sofia. This part of the Reina Sofia doesn't hold the collections. You can get to the collections, but this is all the public spaces, the library, the bookstore, the temporary exhibit space, the auditorium, okay? And you can see it here. This is a wonderful picture. Actually, I didn't take this picture. One of my former students did. But you can see through the, standing in the courtyard, through the library to the street, okay? And this is the bar, okay? Now, oops, I don't want to go that one there. Now, what unfortunately was wrong with this is that that space is only quasi-public, okay? The idea of a community of people moving and floating back and forth works as long as the people who control the space allow you access to it. It's not true public space, and that's what's happened in most cities around the world. True public space shrinks because cities have found out that the easiest way to control and maintain public spaces is to make them not quite so public, okay? Try going into Washington Square Park at 11 o'clock at night and yell, "Viva la Revolucion," okay? You'll be surrounded by 100 policemen. Try doing the same thing try going into Bryant Park, okay, and putting up your communist brochures or creating revolution. You'll be thrown out because Bryant Park is now part of a neighborhood development project and it's not public space, and this goes around all over the world, okay? Now, what happens then is Nouvel's project of making the Reina Sofia connect with its environment turned out to be a really great idea and tremendously myopic. It was tremendously myopic because Nouvel only projected what he saw directly. Gentrification, okay? Dolce & Gabbana. He was unable to connect with the culture that had been there before, what had occupied the buildings. He was unable to connect with what was being pushed to the side, as happened with the Koopas in Amparo 103. So to a certain extent, what you get is only a simulacra, okay? A simulacra of openness, okay? A simulacra of connection. And that essentially is the problem, okay, in projects like this. It can be tremendously wonderful. It can be terribly dangerous. Caveat emptor. Thank you.